This podcast is made possible by funding from True Patriot Love Foundation.
I couldn't have made it this far without building into my community, and that doing so took real effort. And that just doesn't happen by chance. It happens because you go out of your way to make sure that you've created a community for yourself. In doing so, you create a community that others are a part of too, and everybody wins from that.
The military lifestyle is all-encompassing.
It's difficult but rewarding.
Dynamic. Very, very dynamic.
Unpredictable.
You are in the Canadian Armed Forces or a family member connected to the military. You know the lifestyle can be a challenge.
Military lifestyle is always changing.
In this podcast, we explore the world of deployments, postings, and transitions. This is the military lifestyle. Here's your host, John Shaboon.
Kim Mills is a writer that's been living the military lifestyle for close to 20 years. Her writing, her storytelling, sharing her personal experiences, military families everywhere have connected to her work at She Is Fierce. I speak with her next about deployments, anxiety, and what she has learned from living the lifestyle. So the podcast is called The Military Lifestyle, and we're all about sharing experiences, telling stories, helping people prepare or deal with the lifestyle. And today I'm speaking with Kim Mills from She Is Fierce. Thanks for coming, Kim, or connecting online.
Yeah, thanks for sitting in front of your computer for this interview.
Yeah. So go right into it. What advice would you give to a new military spouse or partner?
My first question is always just whether or not the couple themselves have really taken the time to talk through all the possibilities and that they're comfortable with them, to make sure that they've, sat down and looked at the career ahead, the specific trade, but also just reading up on what some of those job requirements might look like, the absences, the moves, any specific stress. I mean, every job out there has its own stressors that you need to take into account, and really being open and upfront with each other about what that looks like can solve so many issues down the road. There are many spouses or families that kind of go into this where the member either wasn't upfront themselves with what was going to be required, or they just weren't aware of what they needed to prepare their families for. And it's more that lack of real preparation or understanding that leaves people scrambling. So big on communication and talking things through and making sure that you have all that you need to be best prepared. So that's usually my first go-to, is sitting down with your spouse at some point in the very beginning of the process and being sure that this is something that you as a couple or your family is prepared to take on. Yeah,
definitely. The word communication popped out right there, as communication is definitely important. How do you approach communication with your partner?
We've been doing this long enough, and our expectations with each other are pretty clear. We've been married 19 years this spring. My spouse has 20 years in the forces. I'm pretty upfront with asking all the questions that I think I need, not necessarily related to his job or what he does, but relating to what we're going to need to do, what that's going to look like for us is usually my first question. And that just kind of helps remind, I'm aware that my spouse is doing a job that whether or not he's being given information, it might not, be top priority for him to remember to pass everything on. And he might just not understand what would be useful for me to know and what wouldn't, because he's coming at it from a very different perspective. So I ask questions. I don't assume that he will tell me things that I need to know, because he might not realize that it was important for me to know. It's also that he, just like I will forget to tell him stuff that happened in the morning of that day, he would certainly forget to tell me things that he heard 6 hours previous. So I ask questions. We sit down when there's a major event coming up and try to make sure that we're on the same page. I'll ask as many questions as I can think of. I'll make notes, even if during the day I realize that I'm wondering how this is going to get done or whether this is going to happen, to talk to him about. I'm hoping that he does the same with me. This job doesn't lend itself to a lot of, hey, is it okay if this happens? Because we don't always get that kind of option. So it's not really important if he asks me if something, unless he has a choice, he's just not always going to ask me, hey, do you want this to happen? Because chances are it's going to happen whether I say yes or no. So sometimes it's just a matter of asking what it's going to look like long term and, what other events are there. And if I'm looking for support, then just asking him, do you know where I could find that? And if you don't know, do you know who we could ask? So really all of that is just a roundabout way of saying that we try to take the time to sit down and hash things out as best we can when he's home. And that way we're not taken up too off guard if he's not home.
What would you tell someone looking back on your first deployment? What would you tell someone going through that experience?
A lot of times what I say is to just take everything as it comes. In the She Is Fierce community, we've asked other people who've been doing this at least as long as me, some much longer, what their advice or suggestions are. A lot of us, I find, have learned that you take kind of everything with a grain of salt, not to get your hopes up on certain dates or times or expectations like that, because things change. And then also just to be very proactive about what's coming, things that are very practical. And you can find a lot of them in the deployment app or various lists online. The She Is Fierce community has a pre-deployment checklist as well. Be very proactive and very practical about the kinds of things that you're going to need. Things like your power of attorney and benefit information updated and all of those little things. That there's so many ways that you can check to see what's needed, but it's just going to save you so much heartache down the road if you're as prepared as you possibly can be. Absolutely, things are still going to catch you off guard, but the more prepared you are, the easier it's going to be going into it.
So tell me about your experience with anxiety and living the lifestyle.
It's one of those learned lessons that I had to find a way that it was going to work for me. And certainly everybody who struggles with anxiety or depression is going to have their own challenges, different things that'll work for them and different things that won't. It certainly took me a long time to try to find habits that worked best for me. I found that having a regular exercise routine helped keep me grounded. And so I tried my best to stick with that. I certainly try to be proactive when it comes to seeking support and help. That oftentimes we look at mental health support as something that we do when we're in crisis. And I try to look at it more like something we do proactively. Just like getting a regular physical checkup, we can get a regular mental health checkup. There's always going to be lots of new ways that we can learn how to look after ourselves, new tools and tricks on how to best manage that kind of thing. So, when it comes to practicality, I don't spend a lot of time on the news when my spouse is away, or really in general. I'm not a big news junkie. My spouse and I are not people that engage in constant communication when he is deployed. Not that we don't communicate, but we did come from a generation that originally didn't have access to constant communication. And I think that kind of helped us get to the point where I've learned how much communication is good and how much kind of just adds more stress when we just don't have something to talk about, or I'm worried about always getting home to the phone, missing calls, that kind of thing. We're a lot more relaxed, I think, when it comes to communication when he is away, which helps me. I know that not hearing from him is still good news. I don't have to worry unless I hear that I should. That's how I've learned to approach it. And I think that, again, that comes just from personal experience. It works for us.
With the anxiety, when was the first time that you realized that you had this condition?
I want to say in my late teens is when I would have started seeing someone that would have formally kind of addressed that. But I would say that I'd known, whereas it might not have had an actual name to it. It's something that, my extended family struggles with in various ways. So it's not surprising. Everybody will experience it differently. But it's not something that I was ever surprised that I had or that snuck up on me. The kinds of things that cause me anxiety or panic has changed over the years, and I'm sure will continue to. But sometimes the things that I think will cause me panic don't, and the things that I don't worry about end up causing me the most grief. But the tools and tricks I can use to overcome that have stayed pretty steady. I'm not opposed to using medication when I have to, and that has happened on and off throughout my life. For the most part, I have been able to manage with various supports. Yeah, things like regular exercise, knowing, when I'm starting to worry more than usual, and finding the ways that I know will help distract me or move me past it. My spouse has become over the years much more understanding as he really learns what that looks like, to recognize that the anxiety isn't necessarily logical and can't be logically fixed. And again, like I would go anywhere from, deep breathing technique or a moment of mindfulness or some time of relaxation, all the way to when it's required that you just take a couple Ativan and close your eyes for a few minutes. So I'm not opposed to either of those. And I've learned over the years which ones are necessary at which point. So
Something like anxiety, I kind of wonder, so it's obviously it's something that maybe you've always had, but when you're living the lifestyle, it's probably a factor in your overall, I don't know, good mental health. I'm not sure if I'm being accurate there, but does the military lifestyle, can it potentially, I guess anything could trigger it?
absolutely. I mean, sure, when my spouse is deployed, anxiety over news reports or anxiety just because you haven't had communication in a while, or anxiety over just in general, if the person that's away on the deployment is the one that you most likely or most regularly go to when you have issues or need to debrief with, if they're the ones that are away, then that is immediately just a loss of a certain support network, which is difficult. Can the military itself lend itself to anxiety? I mean, absolutely. But I think any job can. Any job has the potential of having danger, and it also depends on, what specifically triggers your anxiety, whether it's physical health, whether it's travel, whether, danger. For some people, they have no issue with hypochondria or anxiety around their physical health, but they may be terrified anytime their family is out driving. And a lot of time, anxiety just has no purpose at all. So when I tried to describe it once to somebody, it was that if someone has never experienced just chronic anxiety, if you can try to describe the feeling you get when you're driving in your car and someone, say, like either cuts you off or pulls in front of you and you have to slam on your brakes, and you kind of get that feeling in your throat, like you're really, really anxious, and it lasts maybe a minute or less before you realize that the incident is over and you can move on. And living with chronic anxiety, especially at a time where my anxiety levels are really high, it could mean living with that feeling of intense panic, right there at the base of your throat for days at a time. There's nothing in front of you happening. There's no, immediate car accident that you're worried about. There's nothing coming. It doesn't have to have a logical reason. While certainly I think that, you can find things that increase anxiety in the military, especially if the person is isolated and in a new community where they haven't found supports to be able to work through those. But in and of itself, when anxiety is part of a mental illness, it doesn't have a cause. So I don't know that, one particular job or lifestyle would be harder than the other, because at least that's how I see it for myself. I'm pretty sure if my husband had another career, I would still be an anxious person. I just find other things to be anxious about.
And when your husband's deployed, can you give us a few examples of places he's gone?
My husband has 3 deployments to Afghanistan. He went on the very first one in 2002. And then he went again in 04, 05, and then in 07, 08. While we were in Kingston, he deployed on Op Impact. Upcoming is, I don't even know the name of it, but it's in Europe. Yeah. So sometimes they have been more dangerous than others, obviously. He is, a combat arms soldier, so that factors into some of them, but not all of them. For his last deployment, I often kind of said that the danger level at that point was really the same as when he had to drive the highway to work every day when he was at home.
I guess that's true.
Then it really has more to do with the absence than the danger.
So with that danger element, the risk lifestyle, how do you approach the risk that comes with the job? Because it's more than a job, right? It's a lifestyle, and it's not just the military member, it's the military family member.
I'm never going to say I knew what I was getting into, but I did. I mean, I married a military member before 9/11, so I think the idea of me ever saying that I knew what this was going to look like is a little far-fetched, because none of us saw most of that coming. But My spouse enjoys his job, similar to, the common phrase you'll hear people say is that, if a firefighter trained their whole career and then never went to a fire, they would be miserable. And it's not because they are hoping someone's house burns down. It's just that that's what they do and that's who they are. And the same goes for my spouse. He likes his job and he trained to do the job that he has. So if he did that for however long, but never had the opportunity to do it in an operational setting, then he would be pretty miserable. That's something that I knew and continue to know about him. When it comes to, when he's away and the element of danger is higher, looking back on those times, I don't know that I really just allow myself to dwell on that. Some days are harder than others, but I was fortunate enough that during those particularly high levels of danger on deployments, there wasn't a big following of social media and constant news. And so it was easier to kind of get on with your life and not focus.
So does the connectedness, you talk about social media and everyone's connected so often, like you're basically connected 24/7, it seems, and there's instant updates in the world. Is that good? Is that bad?
I think that it can be both. I don't think that social media is inherently a bad thing. I think there's amazing social connections to be had on social media, and people have found ways to find the community that they enjoy and be part of it, find people that they enjoy and support them. If you live in a small community, you might find great friends, but you might not find people who share the same interests as you. But we are fortunate enough to live in a global community right now where we have access to all kinds of forums where you can find people that are very similar to you in what they're interested in. For example, and this is one I saw the other day, I was talking to a friend who's really into felting, art felting, like creating things with felt. I didn't know it was a thing until I was seeing her do it. It's quite pretty. Then I found that there is online a group specifically for Canadian Forces families who are into felting art. So if you're posted to say Meaford or somewhere small, and you might not find other people who are interested in that, but we are fortunate enough to have this global community where you can go online and you can connect with other people who have that very specific interest and talk to them about it. So I think that aspect is great. Can it backfire? Absolutely. They've found in various ways that people can end up getting information before it was officially given to them. And that's obviously, a significant problem. I think that it can definitely increase worry or anxiety by the families when they see a lot of information out there, and it's hard to figure out what of that information is related to them or their partner specifically. We see a news article about a child being targeted at a mall somewhere in the southern United States. It's hard not to then fear our own area too, even though it might not necessarily be related. We have that same struggle, I think, when we're looking at if we can see all kinds of information thrown at us all day, every day about dangerous military situations. It can be hard to filter out the things that aren't necessarily related to us or our partner's specific circumstance. And I think it just raises your anxiety altogether. If all you ever see is dangerous or scary situations, then it doesn't matter where those situations happen. That just increases our anxiety. So it all depends on how we use social media and whether or not it's a benefit or not.
Do you feel like you need a strategy to go forward with social media and the level of connectedness?
I have a personal rule that I don't watch or read things if I know that they're going to upset me needlessly. If I feel like I'm aware of a situation that's happening, and part of this is I took a really interesting course on compassion fatigue and vicarious trauma offered by TEND in Kingston. It really solidified for me what I was starting to learn about myself, which was I was easily kind of emotionally driven by things that I would see or read about or even talk to other people about when I was out in the community. I still work on an ability to be able to just say, I don't need more information about that. I don't need to click on that article or read more about that situation. I understand that it happens, but I don't know that it's benefiting me personally. The same comes with, I specifically do that with fiction. I don't watch war movies, even nonfiction documentaries necessarily, because I just know that it's going to increase my anxiety to levels it doesn't need to be at. So just kind of a self-awareness to be able to say, no, you know what, I don't think that I would benefit from watching, seeing, having that part of my social media appetite. I will remove things from my social media if I think that they're just causing me more anxiety than benefit.
What are some of the real great parts of the lifestyle that you've gone through in the last 20 years?
We loved living in Kingston. We loved the experience of moving. The road trips back and forth across the country. We moved from Edmonton to Kingston and back again, which meant we drove actually through the States on our way through both times. We had the chance to visit cities we never would have got the chance to visit otherwise. We tease our kids all the time when they mention somewhere that they haven't got to go. My kids the other day were saying that their friends were teasing them because they'd never been to Jasper, which is just like a mountain resort near here. And so we sat down and asked them all the places, like, you know, have your friends ever been to like Arlington or the Lincoln Memorial or the Smithsonian's or Manhattan on Christmas Eve? Or have they ever been to downtown Nashville? Or have they gone to the Navy Pier in Chicago? Or have they, you know, like all the places that they've had the opportunity to visit, which really just happened because we were moving and we had the opportunity to go through those places. The last deployment, him and I had the chance to use his HLTA period to visit Thailand, which again was something we never would have had the opportunity to do otherwise. And I think most of all, I mean, we've met a community where I've traveled all over the country doing this job now, and the people that I've got to see and the couches I've slept on and the, you know, the friends that have picked me up from the airports or taken me out for dinner or shown me around their favorite spots where they're currently posted. We've got to meet a pretty amazing community. So I think that's probably my favorite part of all of it. There's tons of bonuses out there to being in the forces. And certainly there's challenges like any job, but I'll be the first to admit that absolutely it's given us opportunities that we never would have had otherwise.
Is there anything else you'd like to share?
I think that if anything, all I wanted to share is that I couldn't have made it this far without, you know, building into my community, and that doing so took real effort on our part. We had to be willing to show up and watch kids for friends so that they could get some time off. And we had to be willing to be the birth partner for someone while their spouse was away and put actually, you know, real work into try and create friendships. But those friendships are what have gotten us through this far. We have been infinitely fortunate in the ways that people have helped us. I can't even begin to describe all the various ways that people have supported us and encouraged us and done things for us that got us this far. And that just doesn't happen by chance. It happens because you go out of your way to make sure that you've created a community for yourself. In doing so, you create a community that others are a part of too. And everybody wins from that. Everybody has their own ideas of what they like in a community. It's certainly not all going to be the same as what I would want. But once you know what you're looking for in a community, there are probably other people out there who want the same thing. So I just encourage people to make that a priority so that they have the people that they need around them.
Thank you very much, Kim, for your time today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
You can learn more about Kim Mills at her website, sheisfierce.net. She also does public speaking and is active on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, to name a few. She's the author of the Way Home series of books. You can find those for sale on Amazon.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Military Lifestyle. To learn more about this episode and to check out our other resources like the deployment app, go to esquimalt.mfrc.com. A special thanks to True Patriot Love Foundation for funding Season 1 of this podcast, and to Organized Sound Productions for bringing our idea to life. Please share this podcast with your military family or with someone living the lifestyle. Subscribe to The Military Lifestyle on your favorite podcast app. Your support is greatly appreciated. Thank you for listening.